Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. It's part 2 of the November Q&A series, where we usually do about 3 of these videos. It tends to be about right. So we're going to be on part 2 of the YouTube questions, then there'll be part 3 covering the Patreon members. Thanks to our Patreon members who do support us directly. It's always nice to chat with you guys in the Discord and stuff like that. So yeah, it's always good to get a plug in at the start of these episodes, isn't it?
Got to get them.
Yeah, that's
while
right.
They're not looking.
So yeah, well, guess we should get the rest of the questions. Let's get into it. Why and how does hardware architecture matter in terms of performance and efficiency? And what has Intel and Nvidia done better than AMD on 7nm to get more performance and efficiency on their 12 and 14nm processors?
Well, I think the second question somewhat answers the first one. But yeah, like, the design is important. I suppose it's like your engine in your car. If it's designed well and refined over time, then it will be more powerful and more fuel efficient than an engine that's not as well designed. I mean, and that's kind of what we're seeing with the second question, with Nvidia on an older node, kind of keeping up and beating AMD on a much newer 7nm manufacturing process. And it's because Nvidia's design, well, I think Nvidia's design is just more purpose-built, more lightweight, more ready to take on gaming, whereas AMD tried to sort of do everything with GCN.
Yeah, I mean, we saw with like, what was it, Vega and those sort of designs where it's just massive amounts of, stream processors in there. Sort of tried to make it target compute, tried to make it target gaming, was very successful for compute, wasn't that successful for gaming, ended up being not as efficient. Whereas I think with these RDNA designs, they're sort of moving in a slightly different direction to allow them to more closely target gaming performance, which is going to help them with one of their biggest customers, that being game consoles for the next generation. So I would be interested to see how their refinements go. Obviously, NVIDIA's got the big advantage, as you say, because they've been able to refine their architecture for so long, which is why they've got their advantages now. So how AMD does targeting back more towards gaming, whether that will see them edge ahead with efficiency and sort of catch up to what the other designs are doing.
Yeah, well, it already has, and it definitely will.
Have you ever thought about making a video about how future-proof some of video cards you guys test will be, or just including that in your reviews? What I mean by that is, for example, is the 5700 XT going to be able to last you 3 years and be capable of 1440p 60 FPS all that time? Or would you be better off investing a bit more, especially when you see games like Red Dead 2 and new consoles coming out next year? I think it's like with any sort of prediction.
No, hang on. Sorry, I'm going to interrupt. 3 years' time, 5700 XT predictions. Will it be faster than an RTX 2070 Super?
I mean, maybe.
I don't think it'll change too much.
I wouldn't have thought it would, but
yeah, I'm going to hold you to that maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I think this question is sort of asking, if you've got a performance target, is your card going to be good for however many years? And it's like, well, how do you know that? I mean,
yeah, it's impossible to answer the question, but basically, if the card has a good amount of VRAM right now, I mean, I think we talked about this on last month's Q&A. Someone asked, why do AMD cards typically seem to age better than NVIDIA cards? And the short answer was their driver development is slower, so therefore they don't get the most out of the card till kind of the end of its life cycle, and they typically have more VRAM. But in the case of like the 5700 XT and the RTX, even the 2060 Super or the 2070 Super, they're all 8GB cards, same GDDR6 spec. Yep. So VRAM isn't going to be an advantage there. So they should technically all age about the same.
That's what I would have thought. So yeah, I think just with these predictions, it's always too hard to call these sorts of things.
Not something you can include in a review.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone was really expecting, at least this year, a game like Red Dead 2 to try and do as much as it does with its ultra settings. Those sort of game releases are quite rare, and you don't really see the boundary getting pushed like that too often. So, is a game next year going to do that? Who knows? I mean, you can't really say for sure. The thing is, all you should be doing right now is buying the product that is the best thing that you can afford right now, and sort of make sure that you're targeting the performance you want today, and then just hope for the best.
Yeah, it's why future-proofing is always a dumb concept.
Yeah, because you can just upgrade.
As long as you've bought something that's in that efficiency window of cost per frame, and haven't overextended to something that is a little bit faster, but you're probably not going to notice it. And that's why we focus so heavily on cost per frame. if you're always getting something that's high value now, it's chances are in the future it's going to have been worked out as being the best value option rather than spending more now to hope that it lasts longer, because in a couple of years down the track you can just buy a new product. Out of all of the possible hardware releases next year, which one are you guys most excited for? Some examples: NVIDIA 3000 series, Ryzen 7nm plus CPUs, AMD 7nm GPUs, so more of them, higher end ones, presumably, or the Intel GPUs. I think, do you want me to go first?
Yeah, go first. Yeah.
I'll just run over Tim with this one. I think, given how exciting the new 3rd gen Threadripper CPUs have just been, which we've just looked at, and they were loads of fun to test, I think the Ryzen 4000 series is the thing I'm most excited for. Though I'm excited for the GPU wars to kick off as well. I think next year we are going to get a lot of exciting products. So
yeah, I think next year will be a really good year, as a lot of companies sort of move towards these new, NVIDIA moving to a new process node, hopefully Intel getting their act together and doing that as well. I think Zen 3 is probably not going to be as much of an exciting release as Zen 2, just because...
Yeah, it's fair.
I think we're going to see that sort of cadence. They're still going to be on 7nm probably plus, so won't see as much as with this generation. So for me, it's probably more on the GPU side. You mentioned Intel GPUs. I'm interested in that product just to see what they do, but I don't think at least the first iteration will be too much of a challenger. So from my perspective of trying to recommend the best quality products and have the best quality products for gaming, can't see that being too much of a concern. But certainly I'm excited to see what NVIDIA does with their 3000 series cards in terms of how much more performance they'll get moving their architecture or using a new architecture on a new node, because it's been a little while now and we should be expecting big things there.
Yeah, that could be really exciting.
But on top of that, AMD also hopefully pushing more into the high end, because what should be happening next year is NVIDIA on this new process node getting a lot more performance, and then AMD also reintroducing themselves into a proper high-end market segment. So having those two things happening at the same time is the thing I'm most interested in, because hopefully they'll have big flow-on effects throughout the rest of the stack. And I think, the rumors of what the consoles are going to be capable of being like, we've even heard like 80 compute units from a Navi design. It's like, that's going to be pretty powerful in a cheap package. So what's the flow-on effect for PC gaming?
Yeah.
Are we going to get even more powerful stuff? Is that stuff going to be quite affordable? I think there'll be lots of exciting stuff happening.
Yeah, well, that's for sure. Next year is definitely going to be a really exciting year on the PC front.
It's going to be good for gaming, I think. There's been a few stagnant years.
Yeah, well, this year was pretty good. Good, but I think next year is going to be a lot better. So fingers crossed anyway. Considering the performance of the 32-core Threadripper, so the 3970X, don't you think that the 64-core Threadripper, the 3990X, will be too good and hurt Epic in some ways? I understand that Epic still have more advantages like the extra RAM channels and PCIe lanes, but I still feel like there are not much people for whom these things matter that much.
I mean, it's kind of two different markets, isn't it? It's generally not something people would do, is take an Epic CPU and use it in their workstation. Like, that's more of a server type thing. I guess it's more like, would a server company put Threadrippers in their server as opposed to...
Yeah, they're two
Epic
different
products.
targeting two different use cases, I believe. I don't think, while there may be some overlap in some industries or with some clients, I think for the most part you either want Epic or you want Threadripper.
Yeah, and I think,
even core count aside.
Yeah, and I think, the Threadripper parts won't be as expensive as Epic. How much cheaper they'll be, who knows? It's probably going to be... The 64 core is going to be expensive.
What's 64 core Epic, like $6,000?
It's over $6,000.
And so we're expecting this to be, I don't know, $4,000?
4,000-ish, maybe even more. So...
It'll be... Well, yeah, it's hard to say, but...
So, I mean, it's kind of... I just can't see a server company choosing to use Threadrippers, because with Epic as well, you get you're dealing with a whole different part of AMD that deals with validation and sort of your enterprise focus in a different way. So if you bought Threadrippers to use as a server, would you get AMD's server class support? No. If you bought Epic, would you get their server support team? Yes. And I think that matters a lot to those sort of use cases.
And do the server boards even support Threadripper?
I don't think so.
Probably not.
So you wouldn't get advantages like your, dual socket support and all that sort of thing. So Even though the PCIe lanes and the RAM channels may not seem like big advantages for something like a server, they tend to be quite important because a lot of servers do populate all the RAM slots with maximum
I/O
memory
performance is massively the memory, the quad channel memory for the desktop usage is going for the 8 channels is massive difference. Okay, one of these overclocking questions. I think we answered a similar one, so we'll be pretty quick on this one. But with relatively recent changes to boost behavior for CPU/GPU, like Ryzen PBO and GPU Boost 3.0 and future iterations, is overclocking doomed to become obsolete in the mainstream and reserved for Allen 2 Pros only? Pretty much. Yeah, we talked about, I think, might have been in the last month thing. We're basically saying, overclocking's pretty much dead. And Tim was pretty happy about that.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing. Getting everything that the silicon do out of the box is definitely the best way to go. If you're leaving a free 20% performance or 15% that you can just enable with a switch with only a few tweaks, it might consume a bit more power. That's leaving performance on the table that a lot of general consumers won't be able to get. So having all these little advantages you can have where it's basically overclocking for you makes it just so much easier. I mean, GPU overclocking is really a pain.
It is.
You have to change it you have to apply the settings every time you load up, and it's a bit finicky. I mean, NVIDIA doesn't even allow you to really modify much of the power delivery stuff, so that doesn't give you too much.
The only type of overclocking recently that kind of makes sense because there's decent gains to be had there, and I say kind of makes sense, is like Cascade Lake X. You can boost performance up by like 25%, but then the power draw is insane. But that's kind of what overclockers like dealing with, overcoming those kind of challenges. So if you get a product that, like, Ryzen can't overclock outside of its efficiency window too far, whereas Cascade Lake X can. So products like that, I think overclocking will live on. But how many more products like that we're going to get? And with them moving to 10 nanometer, that'll probably be a similar situation to AMD.
Well, overclocking used to be something that just like everyone would do. I mean, it's just like a mainstream sort of thing to get more performance out of. But I definitely think these days it's more of almost like a hobby type thing. It's not about making your applications or games faster anymore. It's about hitting those records and getting it to speeds that are unheard of. So I think that's what overclocking is going to become about. So not that I mind too much. Do you think AMD will overtake Intel in terms of single-threaded performance with Zen 3? How long do you think it will take for them to gain significant traction in the mobile sector? So 2 slightly different questions there, but let's tackle the single-threaded performance thing.
They've kind of already overtaken them for single-thread. Like the 3950X in a lot of, like Cinebench, for example. I know it's a special, it's not a gaming workload, for example, but they kind of have. The reason Intel's still often faster in games is because of latency, not so much single core performance. So it's cache and memory latency.
I think a lot of this as well will hinge on where Sunny Cove is positioned in terms of when it's coming to desktop, because there is a chance that Intel will be able to retake a bit of single thread performance with their new design. We've seen on the mobile parts that they actually get fairly decent single core performance gains. So if that is available to compete with Zen 3, then you say it could be a close battle. But if we're seeing Zen 3 compete with 14 nanometer, I think that's pretty comfortably going to be a Zen.
I would have
just
thought
based on what we're seeing now. It's not going to be slower. So if anything, it'll be better. How long do you think it will take them to gain significant traction in the mobile sector? I think Zen 2 APUs will be really good. If you've got the efficiency of the 7 nanometer parts with the performance they're giving, it's going to be a massive performance improvement, because Ryzen Mobile isn't that impressive right now in terms of performance. It's pretty slow compared to what Intel's offering. So we should get a big gain there. We'll get a big GPU gain. The question with this sort of thing is not really about whether the product's any good or not. It's about whether OEMs are interested in it.
Yeah.
So do they have the market, sort of brand power with Ryzen to convince like an HP or a Dell to use Ryzen over Intel? Will they do it simply because of the efficiency question to get better battery life? I mean, it'll be really interesting to see where it goes, and very hard to say, because I thought Ryzen Mobile a couple of years ago was quite a compelling option. Didn't see too many gains. It's pretty sort of stagnated since then. So
yeah, it was pretty early on. I think the next generation or two, they'll crack into that market, I think.
Yeah, so I guess we started to see a bit of it with the Microsoft Surface using Ryzen Mobile for one of their systems. So I'm hoping we see a bit more traction in there because competition in that space would be good for everyone.
How important is cache memory on CPU in terms of games and productivity workloads in real-world scenarios? Does AMD increasing L3 and L2 cache in their CPU really impact outcomes, and how?
Well, it's like having more memory in your system, isn't it? You add more cache. I mean, it means the CPU can load more with really, really fast access to it. So if they're able to get that as big as they possibly can, that will just allow them to load more into that memory and have really quick access to it and improve performance in things where that's a big concern. And it certainly helps with games, as you've found recently.
Yeah, it definitely does. And that seems to be the situation with the 3rd gen Threadripper. But as Tim said, it's like running something exclusively from your hard drive and then running it from inside system memory. Significant differences in bandwidth. And you only have to look at the bandwidth reports for L1, L2, and L3 cache compared to the system memory, then an SSD, and then a hard drive. So obviously the closer you can have it to the thing doing all the data crunching, the better. Oh, I think I might try my hand at answering this one. With a wide color gamut monitor that isn't a proper HDR one, such as HDR 400, does it make sense to turn HDR on in games for more accurate colors? Well, what do you reckon, Tim?
I was really hoping you'd give your insights there, Steve, into this one. Would have been
very insightful.
It's from what I've seen with those HDR 400 monitors, if you turn HDR on, it doesn't necessarily make it more accurate. The game just shows colors differently.
Well, I think HDR 400 is a fake HDR spec and doesn't have the 3 pillars required for true HDR.
At least I know you're watching my videos. From what I've experienced, it just looks different. I wouldn't say it's less accurate or anything. It's just the game goes, oh, it's HDR mode now. I'm going to do my HDR thing, and they sort of give a different style. It's like if you watch movies and you have an HDR TV. If you watch like the Blu-ray version and then you watch the HDR version, you're not just getting HDR. You're getting like the person that made the HDR version's interpretation. So they change like a lot of the colors and tones to better fit what HDR can do, and it can change the look of the movie quite a lot.
Okay.
So you see something similar with games a lot. So the thing that I find the biggest issue with the HDR 400 tier monitors is they don't really know how to handle HDR very well at all. So it tends to just look worse, in my opinion. The game does a little bit of that because, again, like we've been talking about, changes a lot of how things are supposed to look. But at the same time, the monitor, it could just be like, oh, I don't really know what to do with this, so I'm going to make it look weird. So if you have one of those monitors, I just think leave HDR off. Just keep with your SDR experience. And if you like the way that HDR looks, consider just turning up your brightness. Because often all the HDR mode does is like, oh, you want to run this at like the maximum brightness on your monitor. So give that a shot and see what it looks like. That can often be just as good.
All right, question here that I'm going to palm off to my lovely assistant, Tim. Do you expect Zen 3 mainstream desktop CPUs to beat Intel CPUs in gaming before next-gen consoles launch?
I mean, if you would only be talking about one additional generation for each product here. So we'd be looking at what's Intel doing the next gen, what's AMD doing with Zen 3. So I think if Intel's stuck on 14 nanometer, how much higher clock speed are they going to be able to get? Because that's what's going to give them more gaming performance.
I don't think they're getting more higher clock speed.
Can't see them getting more clock speed. So let's say for the next generation, Intel's performance is the same, which means what's Zen 3 going to do? And I think given how close it is now, I think it's realistic to expect that they probably would be able to beat Intel in gaming with just a little bit of a frequency increase, which will help lower latencies, improve cache performance, which would help for gaming. So
certainly on average.
Yeah, I mean, given how close they are now, it's only going to take like a little bump to put them right up to the same performance as a 9900K/KS. So I would expect that to happen. When do you think 1440p will become the new standard for gaming? 2560 by 1600 and similar resolutions have been used in benchmarks since 2008, but it seems that most modern GPUs are capable of 1440p to an extent. Also, when can we expect 1440p 240Hz monitors? Those monitors are available now. I've actually got one in my office, so see a review of that soon. As for when it will become the new standard, I mean,
it is the standard, depending on how much money you want to spend. Like, what's the standard budget? But I don't know. Are there more, like, if you go to Newegg, are there more 1440p or more 1080p monitors?
I'd say there's equivalent amounts. I think I always look at like what is the most popular resolution people are using. We recently ran a poll and it seemed like when you combined the 1080p non-high refresh and the high refresh models, it was about 2/3 of our viewers said they used a 1080p monitor as opposed to sort of 1/3 on 1440p. So that's obviously increasing a lot, but clearly 1080p is still used a lot. And I think part of that comes down to the fact you can buy a 1080p monitor for like $100, $200, 1440p high refresh, and high refresh is obviously very important these days. That's more of a $300 plus type thing.
I didn't think there was that much difference. I was probably thinking more about like 24 inches versus 27 inches and not so much the resolution.
So yeah, I think that has a little bit to do with it. And once you can get 1440p 144 hertz for $200, I think that's really when we'll start to accelerate, because
now that makes sense.
Realistically, how much cheaper can a 1080p monitor get from what it already is now? I've got in my office, I've got a $140 1080p 144 hertz monitor to review. One of the cheapest ones you can get. It's like, that's pretty cheap. But you can also get the cheapest 1440p 144 for $250.
Yep.
So once that starts getting down to that category, then boom, I think that
makes
really
sense, because
off.
that's mainstream GPU territory.
I think what you would have seen back in 2008 is sort of people would have been thinking 60 hertz versus 60 hertz. So 1080p, you move to 1440p, it's like...
Yeah, we talked about this again last month, though, when people asked about, or someone mentioned, I think it was the Patreon edition, someone said, why aren't I into monitors? And like, no, I've just bought expensive monitors. And the 2560 by 1600 Dell monitor they had, that was like $2,500, at least Australian.
Yeah.
So they were they were like your high-end 4K monitors of today back then.
Yeah, I think if anything, having high refresh rates like 144 hertz has extended the life of 1080p beyond what people were expecting.
Yes.
Because the thing back then would have been you just get your resolution upgrade, but suddenly in between those generations we've got the high refresh rate thing, which, you know, if I'm choosing 1440p 60 or 1080p 144, I'm going 1080p 144.
Yep.
Whereas now I think we're starting to move towards that high refresh 1440 being affordable, which will make the change happen.
Okay, wait for Zen 2 mobile APU or Zen Plus mobile is enough. I need APU for longer battery life in an Ultrabook with decent graphics performance. Where's Jared from Jared's Tech when you need him?
Go ask Jared for deep insights into laptops. From what I've tested, I wouldn't recommend Zen Plus Mobile right now. Not only because Zen 2 is coming so soon, probably in the first quarter of next year, but because Zen Plus Mobile isn't that impressive up against Intel's options right now. It's pretty slow. It slacks behind a fair bit. And the one thing it does have in its good GPU performance is pretty easily negated by either new Ice Lake parts or just by a discrete GPU. Like, even Ultrabooks these days, a lot of them have your sort of MX150s, MX250s, which are generally as good as or faster than the Ryzen mobile graphics. So I wouldn't be recommending Zen Plus. If you need something literally right now, and I talk a little bit about this in some of my recent Ice Lake videos, I'd be looking for Intel's latest 14 nanometer parts. I'd skip Ice Lake with a discrete GPU. You pair that with a discrete GPU, you get a lot of performance. And while I don't do a lot of battery life testing, from what I've understand from people that do, it seems like AMD still has a little bit of a way to go to get their power management on their mobile parts to as good a level as Intel. So that could also be a consideration for you, that Intel will probably give you a bit better battery life as well. So yeah, strange recommending an Intel product, because on the desktop side it's kind of more difficult to recommend, but on the laptop side
they're still killing it for the mobile stuff.
Yep.
No harm intended. That's kind of like a no offense start, isn't it? Yeah.
Yep.
No offense, but if spending from your own pocket without getting sponsored, like all those RTX boxes, everything. Bloody hopeless, Tim. Cut me in on that RTX money. Where was I? And what would your build, or what would we build for ourselves? Steve and Tim, your use case as a YouTuber doing your own hobby. So, okay, what sort of editing rig? I assume is what he's...
I think so.
Well, we don't, for personal use, or even certainly a recommendation to you guys, if it was sponsored, it would be sponsored because that works for us, as in we want to use this hardware and we can also tie some sponsorship into it, I suppose. I don't think we've ever done that before.
Not really.
But like we're going to do, well, actually, perfect example. We plan on doing probably early next year probably a live stream where we're going to build our own editing rigs based around hopefully like the 3970X is probably the CPU or the 3960X that is what we both want to use. And if MSI or Gigabyte were to sponsor that stream, that'd be good, but we wouldn't be using a Gigabyte motherboard if it was crap.
Yep.
We would just go to their competitor because, if Gigabyte were willing to sponsor it, MSI would probably be willing to sponsor it, or ASUS. So we'll work out what board we want, and then if some sort of live stream sponsorship deal came. Yep. Yeah, we haven't done that sort of thing before. But basically what I'm getting at is we would just pick the hardware because that's the hardware we want to use, and we're not going to recommend a board with a crappy VRM, or we're not going to put up with one with a crappy VRM. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, especially because with stuff like video editing, we make money from video editing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's our jobs. So even if we were having to spend money on like a 3970X build, we would still do that because as a professional working in that industry, that sort of thing helps us a lot with our work. So you just spend the money.
Yeah, and I think
you get big gains.
I think it's pretty obvious that we're not going to take sponsorship money to advertise a product we think's crap.
Yeah.
Like, even if ASUS came to us and said, we want to run pre-roll ads on your channel for 6 months, which would be worth a lot of money to us, and we want to advertise the RX 5700 XT tough, I'd be like, well, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
Like, is there a good product you would like to advertise on our channel? Because we're not going to advertise products to you guys that we know are crap. It's
that's
that
right.
simple. So we're not going to do a sponsored build with an entry-level MSI X570 motherboard. If it's out of our own pocket, I think I would get the 3960X.
Probably.
I don't think I'd bother getting the 37X for that 10 seconds it saves me in video encoding. So I'd get the 3960X. I would get a reasonable TRX 40 board. It wouldn't be an entry-level one. It'd probably be more your mid-range. 64 gigabytes of DDR4 memory, a decent M.2 NVMe SSD, decent case, graphics card. Don't know. Probably just like an RX 5700 XT.
Yeah.
Yeah. I used a Vega 56 for ages because I just had it. It worked fine.
And that will do it for part 2 of the November Q&A. Steve's looking pretty tired after asking, or well, not asking. You guys have been asking. We've been answering the questions.
Trying to answer. Yep.
Giving it our best shot. So yeah, I think he needs a bit of a dad sleep and
need a couple of days of rest.
Yeah,
just take it easy and then ease back into the benchmarking and the content. So
you have been doing a lot of benchmarking lately, so you probably do need a bit of a break.
I've had permanent, like at best, pink eyes. Yeah. At night they go very red.
I don't think you want pink eye though.
Well, not pink eye, just lightly bloodshot.
Okay, so
don't complicate it.
Not pink eye, just in case you guys are wondering. Yeah.
Or pink forehead.
Well, that's. I'm glad that's kind of healed Has it healed pretty well?
Yeah,
it's okay. Yeah. Hopefully, there's no lasting damage there.
Hasn't improved anything.
I'm trying to end the video.
Wrap it up.
All right. Like the video, subscribe for part 3 and the rest of our non-Q&A content. Get on the merch store. Get some Christmas merch while you can. I'm not sure when this video is coming out, when the discount on our store is live or not, but there's like a discount for Black Friday and.
Oops, I have to edit that.
You're showing off your dad bod, are you? Yeah, you're rocking the happy unboxing as well. So yeah, you can get that stuff through the merch store. There might be either just starting or during the period where you can get 15% off on the store for Black Friday. So check that out. And what else? I guess I'm your host, Tim.
I'm Steve.
Yeah, we'll catch you in the next one.